Greetings everyone and welcome back to 365 Days of Prog. Today we will be reviewing the new Mythology suit by Symphony X.
Hi, my name's Naomi. I'm an avid progressive rock fan, but I'm a long ways from knowing all the prog albums out there. But this year, I'm gonna give it a try. This is 365 Days of Prog.
So this really unique concept album was a definite surprise to me. I wasn't expecting to listen to anything like this anytime soon, so it's pretty cool, and I think the only way I can share with you that is to share with you some of my favorite bits from this album.
Here we are, children of sun and stars, the first to know and to understand. Bow down to me, we will never understand. Take my hand and you will see, every time.
Now, this album came from the progressive metal band of Symphony X. It's their 5th studio album and it was released back in the year 2000. Now, this one was a game changer for the band because as far as I'm aware, no album that came before or after it matched its peak. But I'm actually saying this off of assumptions. I've read this online. I don't know any of their other albums personally. But what I do know and can say is that this album is a grand experience of a lot of surprises. I liked it very much right from the first track, like the first track called Prelude. You have the Latin choir singing and it's so amazing. It has the orchestra and the lovely players who will be carrying this album. So firstly we have Russell Allen. Now he's on the lead vocals and he sings quite lovely, I think, on here. He's not growling, which is something I appreciate quite much when I'm listening to metal. I think his singing is pretty good, although I don't quite like it, but something tells me it's not actually his singing, but it's the mixing of his voice. He always sounds a bit off in my opinion. I might be completely wrong, but I think it's just not balanced as good as it can be. We've also got Michael Romeo on the guitars. Now he did the guitars fantastically, but I think what I would most be proud about in this album if I were him is the orchestral arrangements he was on. And with Michael Pinella, he's also on keyboards but also on the orchestral arrangements, and those two guys, they really created the grandiose sound of this album with the orchestration. Now we have a third Michael on here. We have Michael LePond on the bass on here, and we have Jason Rouleau on the drums. And together all of these people make up the quintet, which is called Symphony X. Now conceptually, the idea of this album is about mythology and specifically the lost city of Atlantis. Now while I really like the concept, I kinda didn't get it. It wasn't really passed through all that well in the album, at least in my opinion. And I think the music on here is a prime example of symphonic progressive metal. I like it very much. I like the way that they incorporate all very classical instruments and, you know, compositions inside of here, because apparently this one has a lot of nods to actual classical compositions, which I am too dumb to not know myself. Yeah, I really don't know classical music all that well. Like I only know the very known, you know, pieces. Honestly, what do you say? Like, I don't know classical music enough. I can make a series out of it. What do you say? Do you think I should get to know classical music better? Maybe we could do in the year of 2023 like 365 Days of Bach. No, but I'm just kidding, of course. I find that this album actually is very grandiose and very, you know, majestic in some way, in a very mythological way. But honestly, from my first listen, it's kind of forgotten on me. I can't really tell most songs apart from one another. When I finished listening to this album, I kind of realized that it all felt like one amalgamation of many tracks on here, and I couldn't really tell each one apart from the other. But honestly, I think if I listened to this one a second time, it would all be much more clearer. But the thing with this series is I don't really have a lot of time to listen to a lot of albums because this is still daily, and thus I won't be getting to a second listen anytime soon. What I will tell you is my favorite tracks on here, the things I remember most from this first listen. So firstly we have the track of Communion and the Oracle. I think that one's a great one, I really enjoyed listening to it, but when it comes to being my favorite, there is no other than Evolution, the Grand Design. The chorus of that song, like specifically the chorus, is just, it's beyond perfect basically. But honestly, as much as I would have wanted to tell you more about this album and what I feel about it, I really can't. Like, listening to it, I can't remember what I've listened to. It's just this really one big masterpiece of a lot of instruments, and everything is so grandiose, and you know, there's brass instruments and whatever, and I don't know, I can't really remember what I listened to. I really have to give it another listen now, do I? I will, I promise you I will, but not now. Anyway. So this cover will actually segue us into a different thing that I want to talk about. Does this cover look in any way similar to something else, you know? Because honestly, at least to me, it kind of looks like the album V by Spock's Beard. Now I'm gonna keep the two of them over here on the side because we're gonna do some comparisons. So further looking into this cover, we might already see the similarities. Of course, they're both in the desert. They have this really, you know, similar sand pattern, and it's both very yellow, and then you have the velvet skies, which are eerily quite similar. But what if I told you those were not the only similarities between the two? You see, this goes a bit further. So for starters, let's take the names of the albums. So we have Spock's Beard album called V, simply just, you know, V, and then you have this one which is called V, you know, the Mythology suit. Now, if you wouldn't really want to say the entire name, you would just say V, and thus they have the same name. But honestly, I'm kind of glad that it's not just called V, because I have to do some measures of not having any duplications on the list, and having two albums which are called V is kind of annoying. Secondly, both albums were released while the bands were signed with the Inside Out label. Now that's just a coincidence, but honestly it's a very interesting coincidence. Both of these albums are actually the 5th releases of each band respectively. And lastly, and probably most eerily, I think that the thing that really puts the similarities on the table is the fact that both albums have a pretty long runtime, and both of their runtimes are so similar. They're actually only 11 seconds apart. And when asked about it, the two bands actually said that those all were utter coincidences. They didn't really plan anything about these two, but honestly I think it's kind of funny because there's a lot of things similar between the two, but the only thing which is not really similar is the music itself. But yeah, honestly that's all I have to say about it. It's a way to fill in time because I don't really have to say a lot about the cover itself. I think it's a cool cover. I think the mirror is like really nice. I don't really get the CGI that they used to make this, you know, those two characters in the mirror. It doesn't really look all that well in the test of time, but honestly it's fine, but it's not better than Spock's Beard cover for V. But when it comes to the rating of this album, this one gets a definitive 8 out of 10. But that's about it guys. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for tomorrow because we're going to be listening to The Turn of a Friendly Card by the Alan Parsons Project. But that's about it guys. Have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Bye guys.